Many people think they have a strategy. What they actually have is a collection of opinions. And I think that distinction matters much more than most investors realize. Because if you ask people about how they invest, very often they can explain themselves. They can tell you what they think about the market. They can tell you what they think is expensive, what they think is cheap, what they think is promising, what they think is risky. They have views, they have reactions, they have narratives, but that is not the same thing as having a strategy. And that is where a lot of confusion begins. Because when a person can explain their decisions well, they often assume those decisions must be structured. Not necessarily. Sometimes all that means is that they are intelligent enough to justify whatever they are already inclined to do. An opinion is what you think might happen. A strategy is what governs your behavior, whether or not your feelings cooperate. That's the difference. An opinion says, I think this market will do well, or I think this sector looks attractive, or I think now is not a good time to invest. A strategy says, this is how I will behave. These are the rules I follow. This is what I will do consistently, even when the environment changes. So, speculation tends to react, but method tends to follow structure. Speculation is influenced by headlines, forecasts, mood, recent performance, and whatever feels persuasive at the time. A method is different. A method doesn't need the environment to feel calm in order to function. A method doesn't need the latest news cycle to cooperate. A method is not built out of whatever is convincing this week. That is why I would put it this way. A strategy is not what you believe. A strategy is what governs your actions consistently. And once you see that distinction, you begin to notice something uncomfortable. A lot of investing behavior that sounds thoughtful is actually reactive. It looks like feeling bullish when the news is positive. It looks like becoming cautious when headlines worsen. It looks like changing your preferred investments every few months, not because your process told you to, but because the emotional weather changed. It looks like becoming more aggressive after markets have already gone up. It looks like hesitating, delaying, or stopping when uncertainty becomes louder. And of course, when people do this, they usually have reasons. That's what makes it deceptive. The reasons can sound intelligent. They can sound informed. They can sound responsible. But that still does not make them part of a real strategy, because these are not signs that a disciplined process is at work. These are signs that the external environment is driving the process. This is the central issue. Many investors describe themselves as long-term investors, but when you look at their behavior, their decisions keep changing with every cycle. When markets are optimistic, they become optimistic. When markets are fearful, they become fearful. When the news is confident, they feel confident. And when the news becomes uncertain, they suddenly become cautious. And if that is happening, then what is actually driving decisions? Not a method, the environment. Which is why I often say, if your investing decisions change every time the news changes, you don't have a strategy. And I think that's important because it's very easy to mistake responsiveness for intelligence. People say, oh, I'm just adapting. Perhaps, but there is a difference between thoughtful adjustment and emotional reaction. If every new headline has the power to reshape your investing behavior, then your process is not leading. Your process is being led. And that means what many people call strategy is really just outsourced decision making. They're allowing the market mood, the media cycle, or the latest persuasive story to determine what they do next. Now, why does this matter? It matters because markets will always produce reasons to act emotionally. Let's not forget that. There will always be something happening, right? A crisis, a rally, a prediction, a warning, a compelling narrative, a persuasive expert, a new reason to feel confident, a new reason to feel afraid. These things never go away. So if your investing behavior depends on always feeling clear, calm, and certain, you don't really have a durable process. You have a process that only works when the emotional noise is low. And that is not enough. A method matters because it creates stability when the environment becomes unstable. Systematic investing matters because it reduces the number of decisions that have to be made under emotional pressure. So it will preserve consistency, it preserves discipline, and it improves survivability. And that, to me, is the real value of a system. The value of a system is not that it sounds intelligent. The value of a system is that it still works when emotions and headlines are loud. Now, the tricky part is that intelligent professionals are often especially vulnerable here. Because smart people are usually very good at building explanations. They can make almost any decision sound reasonable. They can defend it. They can narrate it. They can support it with data, articles, commentary, and logic. But the ability to explain a decision is not proof that the decision came from a disciplined process. And that is where many capable people get trapped. They mistake reasoning ability for process quality. They feel strategic just because they can speak intelligently about what they're doing. But in reality, they may still be improvising. And this is why being articulate about your investing does not prove that your investing is structured. Sometimes it only proves that you are articulate. Those aren't the same thing. And if you haven't seen episode 2 in this series yet, watch that next. Because before you can build a real strategy, you have to understand what actually drives investing success in the first place. Because if you get that part wrong, even a disciplined looking process can still be built on the wrong priorities. So let me leave you with this. A real strategy is not the mood. It's not a forecast. It's not a set of changing opinions. It's not a collection of reactions that happen to sound and feel thoughtful. A real strategy is a method that governs behavior over time. That's the difference. And once you see that clearly, another uncomfortable question begins to emerge. If most investing behavior is reactive, what does that actually do to the way most people manage their portfolios? Because very often, it leads people to do something deeply counterproductive. They manage winners and losers backwards. I'm Juan Casas of Beacon Wealth Advisory. I'll see you in the next episode.